o'clock. Right after Jehovah's Witnesses rang my doorbell and woke me up. I'm like, I don't have time for this. I got to go run in it. It's hot out. My dad's alive. Questions? Yes.
Oh, yeah. And the other Mark, how you doing?
Well, is it your
No, that's
Take a picture and go over. Sorry, Joel, you been voted to Kelsey is over.
So how are you doing? Oh, sure.
I usually do buns, so when I do
Oh.
yes.
I know. Leaving Thursday for Weston's Parks. Are you really? What's going on out there? Just relaxation. That's one of my favorite things. I'm out for a week.
Then they turn on the TV and they go to C-SPAN. Digital channel something like
That's over there. The interstate over. We made a move. Came in.
How are you?
Couldn't find a school that you can come out there.
No. How are you doing? Yeah, that's nice.
Hello there. How are you doing? Oh, sorry. Not in my head.
Hello, how are you? Yeah, we went.
Thanks for coming. How you doing?
Hello. Yeah. Hello there.
How are you? How you doing? Hi, how are you? We may be a minute or two early, but
Breaking chairs already?
I wonder whose team she's on. Anyway, there's no law yet that says we can't start a couple minutes early. Not yet. First of all, thank you very much for coming out today. Over the years, I've done like 550 or more town meetings, and the reason is to listen to you folks. It's not for me to stand up here and give you a big speech or anything like that. I want to introduce Emily Clark here, who works out of her Council Bluffs office. Emily was my legislative assistant in Washington, wanted to come back to Iowa, and worked out very, very well. You're doing a great job.
How do you like Iowa, Emily?
Oh, I'm from Iowa originally,
Oh,
so
okay.
it's good to be home,
She's
although
moving
I'm
to North
still
Country.
several hours from my family.
Up in Elgona originally.
Oh.
Well, what, you've got
I'm a
an
northerner.
aunt and
I have an aunt in Omaha, and my sister's over in Red Oak.
Red Oak, so lots of family. Anyway, welcome. When we sent out the notification of them, welcome our Democrat friends back here, so if they're taping, so they use it against me sometimes, whatever I say here. When we set out the notice, we're talking about identity theft as one issue that we're working on. We understand what a huge, anyone who's affected by it loses their identity and knows the consequences. It is a huge issue. We're trying to develop legislation that will address it. There's a lot of new technologies today that are causing opportunities, much greater opportunities than ever before. There's a lot of new scams out there. I think with the President's health care bill that you're going to see a real increase in the number of people, especially with, even though it doesn't directly affect the over 65 Medicare folks, there's a lot of people that are very confused about that. Anyone who ever calls you and wants personal information, never give it to them, any way, shape, or form. But we also, if you have some suggestions or ideas, the enforcement is not that great. It's like 2 years, you can destroy somebody, steal millions of dollars, destroy people's lives, and get 2 years. It doesn't seem adequate to me. We've got to find a way to track it down. There are a lot of issues, obviously, that are on the table. Probably the most pressing at the moment with the fiscal situation that we're in, $17 trillion virtually of debt today. Deficits have continued to go on. It'd be at least $750 billion of deficit spending this year. That's down, but it's primarily due to the fact that the threat of increased taxes at the first of the year. We got a lot of capital gains income, people selling things before the end of the year, which dramatically increased revenues. And it's not sustainable long term, obviously. In the end of September, the fiscal year ends. The Senate has not done any appropriation bills. We've done 4.5, I guess, in the House. So unfortunately, what we're heading for at the end of September is another continuing resolution, which basically just continues government funding as it is today with no changes, not being able to prioritize spending. I chair a subcommittee on appropriations, transportation, housing, and urban development that has sizable cuts from last year's spending in my bill. The Senate bill and the Senate allocation overall is about $92 billion greater than what the House budget is. So how we come to conference and reconcile the differences is going to be very difficult, and also like in my one of the 12 appropriation bills, we're $10 billion less than what the Senate is on discretionary. I don't know how you reconcile that, and that's why, unfortunately, it looks like we're going to continue to funding as it is. The Treasury Secretary a couple days ago came out and said we'll hit the debt ceiling. They've been using extraordinary measures. If you look at the debt clock, it's been stuck there for about 85, 90 days now.
How can they do that?
Well, because technically they're not over
You're still in
the debt
retirement
limit,
funds.
because they're not paying into the retirement funds for federal employees. They're skirting a lot of extraordinary measures, shall we say. And revenues will continue to come in at the same time. So the day that the debt is allowed to rise, it's going to have a huge jump immediately. So there's a lot of backed up spending that is not happening. And technically, it's not technically.
Is there TARP money, like the TARP money, the original TARP money, included again into these budgets as they roll over?
Not TARP money, there is stimulus money.
So
And
the
that's-
stimulus that was this big roundup of money
Right.
from the taxpayer pool, that's continued to be included in the future budgets? Like,
That's,
you know what I'm saying?
right. What you're saying is that stimulus money
They
is
said it was a
is it
one-time
going over and over again rather than
Right.
just one-time money? Yes. Because of the dysfunction and basically in the Senate had not passed a budget for 3 years up until
Right.
this year. So we've been dealing with continuing resolutions, which continue to fund the government at the same level, which
That's what I
continues.
thought.
Yeah. So there is some of that that we can't get rid of until
That
we
wasn't
finally.
one-time funding then,
Right.
in reality, it was not.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yes. So when we get to mid-October, there's gonna have to be some type of an agreement. And if you look at the federal budget, this is about $3.8 trillion, 2/3 of which is mandatory spending with interest on the debt about $250 billion a year. And the rest of it is discretionary. The discretionary portion in the last 3 years, we have reduced by about $100 billion. Where the growth is in the budget is in the mandatory, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, highway bill, mandatory spending, farm bill, mandatory spending, all of these programs that go on unless they're changed or reformed. They're growing at about at least 8% a year. You've got 10,000 of us baby boomers like myself. I just signed up for Medicare last month. I look a lot younger, don't I? Anyway, but the 10,000 of us a day signing up for Social Security and Medicare, 70,000 people. It's going to go on for 20 years.
That's why we have Obamacare.
Well, that's on top. But the fact is, it's simply not sustainable. That our kids, our grandchildren, and those programs are not going to be there, or they're going to have dramatic reductions in benefits and Social Security payments if in fact something isn't done now. And you can do modest things today that will affect over time actuarially those programs in a very large way. So that's what is my hope, that in the debt ceiling, and we're not going to raise the debt ceiling any more than what this spending will be reduced. But we've got to address those mandatory programs and do it now. So, yeah.
Well, Congressman, I too will be signing up for Medicare after the first of the year, but I'm also in the insurance business, and I think it's a wonderful thing now that people can buy health insurance without having to answer health questions. But that's going to also be, that's a two-edged sword, because that money is going to have to come from somewhere. And I think the only way they're going to be able to do that is to constantly increase taxes on people. But I do agree it's a wonderful thing to be able to buy health insurance without answering health questions, and it does take, several of the companies that I represent are taking the stance that you'll see new people in the market that you've not seen before with pre-existing conditions and so on and so forth. So I think that's all wonderful, but when it comes to looking at it realistically, I think most of us look at it like, who's going to foot the bill? Where's the money coming from? You know, are we going to appropriate money for that? All or part of it, along with the government funding? I just think it's a real dilemma, you know, and I think realistically, I don't know how it can happen.
No, well, you're exactly right. The increase in taxes, about $1.2 trillion, about $700 billion cuts in Medicare, primarily at providers, insurance companies, some with Medicare Advantage program. There's about 75,000 Iowans who love Medicare Advantage. That'll be in jeopardy. But when you look at rural America, rural Iowa, and the nursing homes, the home health care providers, right here in Council Bluffs, now they're competitive bidding the medical equipment that goes out to people in their homes, like oxygen, things like that. And that is by companies in Florida that have no presence here. So your medical device people here that service your oxygen machine at home aren't going to be here anymore. If it breaks down in the middle of the night, you're going to have to call somebody in Florida. You know, things like that have real impacts. And it's not cheap You're not saving any money when people have to be in hospitals or nursing homes when they could be in their homes. It costs a lot more money to do that, and that's exactly what is going to be happening. And in rural Iowa, rural America, you're going to see the access to quality health care greatly diminished.
Does the other side see this issue in the same way with the numbers, the figures, the balancing the budgets the same way that we do? Do they see that problem or not?
I don't. All I see, all they want to do is raise taxes and spend more money.
Makes it feel good though.
And you can be very generous with somebody else's money. And,
What about the taxes coming in, the income from the taxes coming in?
right. That's one reason, and I mentioned earlier why we got a spike in revenue this year, because people were afraid at the end of the year last year that capital gains taxes were going to go up, which they went from 15 to 23%, 23.8 actually, with the 3.8% increase with the healthcare bill tax. And so people did a lot of selling of those assets before the first of the year and have paid the capital gains at 15% this year. That's not going to happen over here. So we're going to get back to this. So we've had a spike in revenue. Well, we will have more revenue this year than the federal government has ever had.
What is the
We have a spending problem. We don't have a revenue.
When is the sequestration going to end?
When is it going to end? It'd be 9 more years if nothing is done. Yes.
The only comment I could make on healthcare, I was a nurse at Jenny Hospital for a number of years, and I saw the number of people that didn't have health insurance. They came to the emergency room, and it was very costly for them to do that. I also talked to a number of elderly people that were bankrupted by their medical bills. So
Right.
I'm not sure that the status quo is such a good thing either.
No.
We're gonna pay for it either way, I think, high emergency visits. So I think, just being able to cover pre-existing conditions is so important to so many people.
Yes,
Okay. Well,
It is
it's expensive, but we had healthcare reform proposal that would have addressed exactly what you're talking about without having to have through the private sector. You would have pools for people with pre-existing condition. There would have to be some subsidy. There would cost some money, but we would also, on the caps of the catastrophic caps would be off. That it's going to increase your premium. But to make it affordable, what they're planning on happening is a whole bunch of young people running in to sign up when they can pay $95 fine and not have to purchase it. And when, quite honestly, when these folks age right here, you really don't think you're going to get sick real quick, and you're probably not going to do it. Answer me: does this solve the question, the problem that you saw? Does the President's health care bill solve it?
I think we need to give it some time, see how it goes. I think
The
medical premiums
administration-
are going up anyway.
The administration says that after this is all done, after the government takes over the healthcare business, there will still be 30 million people without insurance in this country. Have we solved the problem? You're still going to have those people coming into the emergency room with no insurance.
And there are still only one, maybe 2 companies in the entire state that are prepared to offer plans like the exchange.
Right. And you, probably 8 out of 10 of you in this room, if you have private insurance, maybe you have Blue Cross Blue Shield in Iowa, they will not be in the exchange.
No.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, since you're taking questions as you're talking, you mentioned the debt
I
ceiling.
didn't get to the good stuff yet.
I'm sure, but while you're in the subject of the debt ceiling, I had a question for you, hopefully a follow-up for you right away.
Yes, sir.
As you're explaining it, obviously it takes the House and the Senate to raise the statutory debt limit. And I say statutory debt limit because I've done the research to find out that it's public law that you have to do that. So am I correct in saying that it has to be raised by the Senate and the House before it can get raised? You guys have to agree to it?
Yes.
Okay, if that's your answer, then I want to know why this is that when I pulled this information off the daily treasury statement of the Treasury Department's website, it says it very clearly. As of May 19, 2013, the debt limit, or the statutory debt limit, was increased from 16.4 to 16.7. Now, how is that on May 19th that got increased without you guys voting on it?
I don't know whether that was part of the fiscal cliff deal last year. I can't tell you, but that we have.
I can tell you with research that I did, I know where it came from. It came from the HR 325. Can you explain to us what HR 325 is? A suspension of the statutory debt limit that was made law by the president when he signed it, turned into Public Law 113-3.
That was it was also the no budget, no pay.
Thank you.
Right.
Do you have any explanation what that means by the?
Well,
I understand. What
It was to give a it was to give a short-term increase in the debt ceiling if, in fact, the Senate would finally do their job and pass a budget. Otherwise, they would not get paid. And that's what that was.
Well, if you don't mind, obviously, Public Law 113-3 is called the temporary suspension of the debt ceiling. To me,
Right.
I understand what temporary suspension means compared to raising a debt ceiling. I think most people here understands that too. You're not raising it, but it got raised. Then what your explanation is, and the research that I've done, they had to, any obligations that the government had to put in, pay for from the day the president signed it, which was February 4th, I do believe, when he signed it, till May 18th, all obligations had to be paid for, so they raised it from 16.4 to 16.7. So again, it wasn't voted on.
Yes,
but
it was. Raising it, the bill was voted on.
The bill was, yeah,
Yeah.
but the raise the debt ceiling, it was not. Okay. That's all I wanted to do. You got my
Okay, yes.
thank you.
The 16.7 is now the debt ceiling. I got that one. No budget, no pay. You're right. Yes.
So how?
Finally, the Senate did it, but they have $1 trillion of tax increases in their budget. That's why we're never going to reconcile the two between the House and the Senate.
So how, Congressman, do you see this thing shaking out here next month or so?
Well, it would be my hope that we could pass a continuing resolution to fund the government probably into December, short term. The October 15th debt ceiling that the Treasury Secretary just came out a couple days ago and said that's what they believe will be the time. That can be actually a huge, large agreement that will address the entitlements again. Like I said before, I won't vote for it unless it actually reduces spending at least by the amount of the increase in the debt. We've got to address the entitlement part of it. And there's folks that think that with the health care bill that somehow we can defund it or we'll shut the government down. Only 15% of the health care bill is discretionary. 85% of it is mandatory spending. We'll go on no matter what happens. And I, quite honestly, don't think it's a sustainable position to have. And it's different than 1995. At that time, we had funded defense, we had funded veterans, we had veterans health care, all of those things funded. So it was a partial government shutdown. This would be everything. So you got men and women overseas fighting for us. You got their families at home. You're not going to take care of them. You have veterans who need health care, who need their services. You're not going to do that. I don't think it's a sustainable position. And I think where we have an opportunity, I think, to make real change, and that's why I want to do this again, was to do something big, to actually accomplish something, get something done positive for my kids and 5 grandchildren. Yes.
Congressman, I think everyone in here most conservatives across the country agree that the biggest problem in this country is the beast that we have in Washington, D.C. called the federal government. And we are just doing nothing but year after year pouring money into this beast, and it just gets bigger, bigger, bigger. Supposedly, according to the Constitution, the states are sovereign, as we all, as individuals, are sovereign. How do we cut the head off of this beast and get things back to where the founding fathers of this country set it up to be, so that we don't have to have town hall meetings like this where you have to come in and listen to your constituents and say, man, what are you guys doing in DC? Feeding your own pockets? Because
That's why I came here for the answers.
Right. Well, I don't know that you want to hear the answer that some people in this room would say is the answer.
It is the biggest frustration I have, and especially being on the appropriations committee. The dysfunctional Congress, in that, and again, the Senate didn't pass a budget for 3 years. They passed an outrageous budget this year. No even thought of ever trying to compromise and to pass appropriation bills. The power of Congress is the power of the purse. And the way you rein in the bureaucracy you're talking about is to actually have Congress be able to do their job and to actually rein in, put provisions in that they cannot do certain functions or that they don't get paid to do certain functions. There's no money to do things. When you look at EPA, when you look at the IRS, when you look at all of those agencies that are totally out of control. And I have never seen arrogance in the bureaucracy like I've seen, because these continuing resolutions don't allow us to actually do our job at all. It empowers the bureaucracy. There's people who will say that there are now 4 branches of government: executive, legislative, judicial, and bureaucratic. And they have grown more powerful than ever before. When you look at the regulations coming down, I mean, it's our job, and with the dysfunction, the lack of being able to do appropriations, prioritize spending, and do prohibitions on activities for the bureaucracy, it'll continue. It's the biggest threat that I think we have in the expansion of government itself. There's out of control bureaucracy that has no accountability. Yes, sir.
Congressman, just recently we found out the whole scandal with the NSA.
Right.
You just talked about bureaucracy, you talked about dysfunctionality and the growth of government. And the NSA, we just found out because of Edward Snowden that they're doing things in secret, and they're probably doing things right now that we're unaware of. Well, just recently, Justin Amash from Michigan introduced a bill to defund the NSA, and you voted against it, and I actually called your office urging you to vote with it. Our 2 Democrat representatives here basically voted against the president, and then yet our 2 Republican congressmen voted, you and Congressman King voted with the president on this. And so I just don't understand how you just talked about bureaucracy and government funding and big government, but then yet you had an opportunity to vote to defund the NSA, which is intruding on the lives and privacy of the American people, but then yet you voted against it. So can you tell me why you did that?
Well, it's not with the president by any means, but let me just say, there was an amendment before that prohibited, that I voted for, that prohibited them from capturing any kind of content from Americans, to stop their activities. The Amash amendment, and there may be disagreement between certain people, but was clearly, in my mind, unconstitutional. The legislative branch cannot tell the judicial branch what their verdict should be before they hear the case. It's a court.
But the NSA, that's not, where's that authorized in the Constitution? Period. The NSA.
It's authorized through the intelligence.
So then they can spy and get in my phone records, and that's okay.
That's exactly why I voted they can't go after any content that you have. What he was doing was not constitutional. Steve King agrees with that, but there are people who will disagree, I get it. But there's no way in the world I can vote for that.
In other words, what you're saying, Congressman, and I think that maybe this will help clear it up for a minute, there are certain guidelines set forth in the Constitution that say, this is how this is handled, this is how this is handled, this can be done by this group, this cannot be done by that group. And if it goes against the Constitution, as a man who swore to uphold the Constitution, you have to vote against it. Now, if you want to stop it, then introduce legislation or have legislation introduced that directly addresses the problem and do it through the guidelines of the Constitution.
Well, we will have this fall the intelligence reauthorization, which will address FISA. Okay, and I will guarantee you that it is going to be tightened down dramatically. If there's any, I'm not sure we know yet all of the. If you're not on the intelligence committee and you're not on leadership who is briefed daily, you don't know all the details of what they're doing. But I will assure you that we will tighten it up very much this
But
fall.
you don't know, you're unaware. You can tighten things up, they're still gonna do things in secret. We didn't know about this whole Verizon, them going into phone records until Edward Snowden. You didn't know that, we didn't know that. So how do you know what they're doing right now?
We will go up, we have access to the bill before it's done. We will have closed briefings exactly as to what's going on from the intelligence committee. It will be a lot different. And how much you can talk about these things in public forum, but they have been successful. The government is not holding any content of anything that you're concerned about at this point. Yes.
Okay, how about this? I started up the Council Bluffs Tea Party a couple of years ago when all this was going on. I got phone calls asking if they could donate. And I says, I can't do that because I don't have a tax status or anything. Well, that's all right. I'll just give you money anyway. I says, I can't take your money. Well, who should I vote for? I says, I can't tell you that. Vote for whoever you want to. My point is that this was entrapment. This was some $100,000 a year employee that was looking for reasons to attack us. All right, here's the bottom line on this, the NSA or any of it. Why don't we get a law on the books that says if they abuse their authority, they're going to be aggressively gone after, just like Edward Snowden and the rest of them. I want protection against the government. You can assure us, and that's fine, but there's always going to be one of those 2 million or a few of those 2 million people that are going to be over here and say, I don't care, I work for the government, and I can do what I want. And I want protection from the government. I want to know what you can do about that.
Are you saying that these are government people that were calling you?
I don't know, but it happened the same time that all those entrapment things were happening. And whether it was the governor or not, I'm 99% sure it was, but whether it was the governor or not, I want protection from the government. We also got the health care bill. What's going to happen with that? You can see all the times that the government can step in there and screw up, and people can die, and they're going to say, oh, well, I work for the government, no big deal. I want protection from the government. That's the bottom line.
Well, what you're saying is illegal, and if you can find out who did it and report it, we will investigate. But until I know that it is actually it's not somebody actually calling and wanting to help you.
Well, rather than concentrate on this specific issue, why not make a law that if the government breaks the law, they are held directly responsible?
They're breaking the law to do that.
I know they are, but there's going to be all kinds of other cases. Whether it be this or the NSA or something, if they're breaking the law, I want them in prison.
Right.
So,
I think he's more talking when the government breaks the law.
Absolutely.
He wants them to go to prison.
why don't we have a law that says, fine, you need to spy on the, you need to have all these privileges and NSA and everything, or in the IRS or whatever it is, fine, but we're going to make a law directly, specifically to you, that if you break the law, we're going to go after you. And that's what I want to see.
It's already there. It's a matter of finding the people who are doing it, and if in fact they're doing illegal activities, targeting people like the IRS was, And now we find out Lois Lerner was working with the FEC and giving them information.
Okay.
But it's not, it's a matter of,
Anybody?
we also need a
other-
Justice Department who will actually go after these people.
That's the point, and that's where the law comes in. It says this is specific law, Justice Department.
If-
You go after, Eric Holder should be in prison. In the same way with the IRS and all this. They've broken the law, but I don't see any charges filed.
You have to have a Justice Department that will enforce the law. I don't care how many laws you have on the book, if they don't enforce it, it doesn't make any difference. And that's a huge problem. Another law that is not enforced is not gonna help.
Well,
Yes.
If I change the subject,
Sure.
being ex-military, I'm concerned about our stance in Syria right now. You have any comments on our possible actions in Syria?
I am signing a letter along with, I haven't seen the final number of colleagues today, telling the president to come to Congress to get authorization before he does anything. I do not see any reason, any benefit for us to attack a sovereign nation in the middle of a civil war with no imminent danger to us. You go to the War Powers Act, it has to be a threat to us for them to be able to respond. And you can't use that to, I think it's simply wrong. I think, can you tell me, I don't think, the administration can't tell you what their foreign policy is.
But we have none in Syria.
Well,
Yeah.
no, and how does this fit into any foreign policy? What is the outcome coming out of this? If it, and they publicly said yesterday, it's not about getting rid of Assad. They're not going after him.
They're both bad guys.
It's Al Qaeda on the other side, so.
Muslim Brotherhood, Al Qaeda.
Yeah.
So why are we doing this?
Why are we helping Al Qaeda?
And
That's what somebody said it on Facebook. We go in there and do airstrikes, we go in the Air Force for Al Qaeda. We're helping them out by hitting all these targets.
So what if you guys, get your number of people to send this letter to the president? They're talking about doing a strike tomorrow. And what if he does it anyways? I mean, this administration is making Congress, and so to a certain degree the Senate, completely irrelevant. He just does what he wants to do. What can you do if you just, I'm just gonna shoot off a little Tomahawk missile and not tell anybody? I mean, how do you rein this thing in?
well, if he, I don't see how he can do it, but if he invokes the War Powers Act, by law, he has to come back to Congress in 60 days. He can